The anime conventions of today do not care about the community that conventions have been trying to foster over the years. I know it is quite the bold statement, but we've been seeing this change happen right in front of our eyes. I've spent years attending anime conventions throughout Ohio and a few nearby in the Midwest. The main reason that I go to conventions is to spend time with my friends, to engage in the fandom culture, and most importantly for me, to perform. I am a stage performer, and it has become a huge part of convention culture to create spaces for performers such as myself. Whether it be through competition, through festivals, or even something as simple as karaoke. I am also disabled. Being a performer and a guest, I get an in-depth look at conventions from behind the scenes, and have learned what works and what doesn't. For-profit anime conventions often overlook their guests' experiences. They neglect accessibility and rarely consider cosplayers. Cosplayers are the backbone of fandom and have been for years, but especially since the late 2000s when cosplay became popularized on social media. Conventions have become places where anime fans flock to spend their time and money, to make friends, and to have fun. Many aspiring con artists and entrepreneurs see the popularity and want to profit from this growing fandom culture. Let's take a step back, or a roll back, though it all began with fan conventions. Fan conventions are a giant part of pop culture. They're places where fans of anime, comics, web series, TV shows, etc. can all gather. You can find others who share your interests, dress as your favorite characters, buy merchandise, and even meet industry guests. Fan conventions are run by solo individuals who most of the time run them as a non-profit. Sometimes they pay their staff, but otherwise they're not really making much money, relying heavily on their volunteer base. These volunteers are typically given free entrance into the convention and a comfortable place to stay during the hours of the convention. So fan conventions can be traced back to the 1900s, when groups of sci-fi fans would get together to learn, discuss, and to dress up. Sci-fi conventions kind of laid the groundwork for the fandom culture that we see today. And then, from everything that I know, people in Japan saw these sci-fi conventions in the West and decided to take the idea and create a space for their most popular media, which we know as anime. Anime's appeal, it resonated with audiences worldwide, and people in the West began hosting them as well. Not that I'm old enough to know, but early conventions tended not to be inside of these huge, sprawling convention centers that we see today, and instead they were hosted in smaller hotels. A place for cosplayers and fans alike to gather, watch an anime that's maybe less easy to find overseas, and to exchange fan-made merchandise, to talk to like-minded people, and to dress up. Now, once again, these are run by volunteers, run by non-profit organizations. These early conventions were about making spaces where fans could express their creativity and connect with other people who shared their interests. Cosplay became a defining feature of anime conventions, but cosplay is more than simply dressing up. It's a kind of fan art and self-expression. This art form inspired competition in costuming, which is now known as cosplay, which literally means costume play. And on October 12th, 2003, the first World Cosplay Summit was held at the Rose Court Hotel in Nagoya, Japan. Activities included a panel discussion and photography session. As it gained popularity, the World Cosplay Summit was reorganized from an invitation-based system to a qualifying system with preliminary events held around the world, which led to the first World Cosplay Summit Cosplay Championship, which formalized the competitive and skill-based side of the craft. Cosplay competitions became a staple of different subsets of fan conventions worldwide, judged on costume authenticity, craftsmanship, and, in many cases, also performance, moving from a hobby to a sometimes even professional industry. It set the stage for rapid growth of the culture of anime conventions in the following years. While anime conventions have always been places for fans, the nature of these events has changed significantly as the years go by. There's been a kind of shift from these fan-driven conventions to for-profit models that can be traced back to the commercialization of the anime industry. Once something becomes popular, brands will inevitably try to monetize it. It's a little more complicated to explain, so I'll give you an example. You can see this in something like Sanrio merchandise. Nowadays, you walk into any store and you can find something branded with the colorful creatures or at least Hello Kitty. But it's not the same as the cartoon that we were all obsessed with back in the 2000s. Now though, they've sold out to hundreds of companies in the US. Or another example, you walk into any Walmart and you can find a Jujutsu Kaisen or a Dragon Ball PNG plastered onto a plain black t-shirt. I mean, these are just examples, but it's an obvious difference in the marketing for something that used to be based on fandom. This shift changed a lot of the way conventions are organized and how conventions are experienced by attendees. It's caused a bit of a gap in what used to be known as a place of community, and instead has become a way for many to get themselves onto what they consider the next hype train. There are positives too. Conventions can draw in much larger crowds. They offer more elaborate programming and chances that wouldn't be possible otherwise. For example, fans can even meet voice actors from Japan in some select conventions across the country. But many of these for-profit conventions maximize their revenue at the expense of their attendees, prioritizing their ticket sales and sponsorships over their audience, which leads me to the next point that I am going to bring up. Overcrowding, long wait times, limited access, and VIP badges, or at least how they're used today, all lead to the lack of accessibility at conventions. For-profit conventions sell too many tickets. This makes the convention center unsafe for everyone. People can knock others over or even roll over other people, and I have seen it happen. People are notorious for ignoring their surroundings at conventions. You're focused on having fun, but these tight spaces can create issues. When there is no room to breathe, it creates risks like fire hazards and even crowd crushes. To prevent this, conventions could limit ticket sales. They could limit the amount of people that are allowed into each room. I know a lot of furry conventions do this, which is pretty cool. I believe Anthrocon does it. Then Colossal Con also sometimes limits the number of people in its smaller places. Though Colossal Con stands out, I think it has some of the better convention management that I've personally experienced, but it is for profit. Sometimes fan conventions lack the funds or the resources to create an accessible space, whether because of financial constraints or a lack of awareness, especially going back 10 or 15 years. As cons have grown bigger, though, it has become clear that accessibility staff are necessary to have on a convention team. But even before this, if someone would need it, they would try their hardest to make sure that every person could experience the same convention. I have a personal example of my experience with MatsuriCon versus my experience with GalaxyCon. You might have heard a lot of the negative press around GalaxyCon within this past year, and I have even made an entire video on my channel which is dedicated to calling it out. If you haven't seen it, you should give it a watch after you're done with this video. But here are kind of the cliff notes. GalaxyCon is one of the worst for-profit conventions. It is known for its overcrowding, overbooking of guests, attendees, and merchandise booths. A celebrity petting zoo, as many people like to call it. It's inaccessible despite having seemingly endless resources, has a lack of care for cosplayers, allegedly laying off its staff, underpaying employees, and having volunteers as a for-profit organization by creating contracts through a secondary quote-unquote non-profit, as well as many other shady business tactics, which I won't completely get into because it is a little scary, and honestly, I think I know more than I should. And so obviously when I went last year, I brought up my concerns about accessibility. They brushed it off. They ignored it completely. They even went as far as straight up saying they don't do accessibility.
We don't have the room.
It's like convention organizers ignore the fact that these events often draw alternative crowds, and many alternative people are neurodiverse. And it's not uncommon for neurodiverse people to also have physical disabilities. Not to mention what many people refer to as the celebrity kissers, which is a separate group of people who make it harder for cosplay-focused attendees to navigate the environment. By celebrity kissers, I mean mostly men who attend these conventions just to pay for autographs from their favorite celebrities with little interest in what the rest of the convention has to offer. Corporate conventions often cater to these celebrity kissers who are primarily there to meet famous people because they give them more money. As a cosplayer, you might want to see a few celebrities, but you're also likely to engage with the other activities that the convention has to offer. Regular con-goers tend to understand the con etiquette. and know how to be considerate of the people around them. Whereas people who only attend conventions maybe once a year to meet celebrities rarely know about the unwritten rules and also disregard basic human decency. This is in stark contrast to every experience that I've had at a fan convention with accessibility, barring Anime Crossroads, but I do not have time to get into that right now. At Matsuricon, for example, I was directed to the front of every line, ensuring my safety without having to ask anyone. Every panel room was set up with space for me to get into it, and every stage I was going to perform on had a ramp. There were a few stages I wasn't using that didn't though, and a few other major problems that occurred over the weekend. So I spoke to the convention director about the issue, and they reassured me they would fix it as soon as possible, and also provided a direct contact for the future. I love you, Matsurika. Fan conventions continue to thrive on community and care for one another, even behind the scenes, despite the ignorance that they might still struggle with. I've also seen firsthand how having accessibility-specific staff can affect a convention. SekaiCon had its first ever year last year. I had a tough time getting through the hallways because they sold more tickets than they expected. To help traffic, they placed big cones into the narrow areas. The hallways were so small that I could not physically fit through them in my wheelchair, so I was directed to the head of their accessibility staff. Yeah. Who made absolutely no fuss about it and moved the cones instantaneously. These for-profit conventions often overbook and overcharge their vendors. Vendors play a big role in any convention. Many are small artists trying to earn a living. For these creators, tabling can be a significant part of their income. However, budgets are tight. They have to pay for hotels, food, tables, commute, and more. This adds up quickly. Many conventions see this as a chance to milk money from the vendors. And I'm not talking about the vendors that have a lot of disposable income, like resellers who inflate prices. I mean small artists and businesses with limited funds. These conventions often charge them high premiums. This is because vendors and artists help pay for most of the rent at a convention. At fan conventions, there's less pressure to make a profit. They focus on covering the necessary costs, whereas for-profit conventions charge steep prices. At these conventions with lots of people coming and going, they make a bunch of sales, but even struggle to break even with the booth's exorbitant pricing. It's also partially because they overbook their vendors. The number of booths at these for-profit conventions is absurd, so there's less chance for your booth to get noticed. And with so much to see, they might not pay attention to your booth. Vendors pay for the convention to run, and the convention tries to make a profit on top of that. So they book more and more vendors every single year, making it more expensive just to keep making as much profit as they possibly can. This can make the vendor hall unsafe and hard to navigate for everyone. For-profit conventions are also known for laying off staff that other conventions know are important, like the cosplay department. Many for-profit conventions pretty much ignore their cosplay department. This isn't a problem that's unique to for-profit conventions though. You'll see it at some fan conventions too, especially those that are focused on comic and games than anime, but it's more common and intentional. They often cut back on these departments, leaving just 1 or 2 people to run them. All of this makes it tough for competitive cosplayers and casual cosplayers alike to navigate and understand what's going on. I've seen it firsthand, also at GalaxyCon, which is one of the worst run cosplay departments that I have ever dealt with. And it is not because of the people in the cosplay department. It is because they got rid of most of the cosplay department and didn't have that many to begin with. GalaxyCon doesn't have a lot of staff to take care of attendees or the competitors, so competitors often get overlooked with no communication. Last year, I heard that cosplayers were sent to a back room with no seating, no water, no food, and nowhere to put their stuff. They had to stand for hours because they weren't given a place to sit, making it really hard for people to participate. Because of how poorly the environment is managed, some people have given up on competing there altogether. It is not a safe, nor is it a welcoming environment. I also wanted to briefly bring up the neglect to add a ramp to a stage for a cosplay competition or a masquerade, which is often because of intentional exclusion and blatant ableism. One of the most popular conventions in the eastern part of the United States is Katsucon. And while Katsucon is a non-profit convention, it is an outlier in that it truly is run like a corporate convention because of the absolute nightmare that it's become. If you want me to do an in-depth video about it, let me know in the comments because I have a lot that I could bring up. But the main thing that I want to focus on here is their lack of accessibility. They've deliberately chosen not to provide signage for the convention center, and on top of this, have not provided a ramp to their stages across their convention center for the many, many years that Katsucon has existed in the Gaylord Convention Center, and even blatantly state in their cosplay competition rules that if you cannot use the stairs, you are not allowed to compete. Honestly, that is one of the most frustrating things about being a disabled cosplayer, competitor, and performer. Being at the mercy of people that you have to beg to care about you. I mean, the amount of stages that I've gone to that I couldn't actually get on because they are not accessible is mind-boggling. But they have the resources to change this, and they've made the choice not to. I could talk for hours about all of the terrible things that Katsucon does within their management, and also how allegedly employees oftentimes quit after one singular year because it is so bad, or so I've been told. But I will spare you that ramble for another video. I believe that these conventions have the capacity to change and to become better. I love conventions, and their existence means the world to me, and has changed my life for better in more ways than stars in the sky. But there are so many things that deserve to be brought up, and I hope to keep the welcoming and inclusive community that I know is still there. The lifelong friendships that we build and the joy that we feel can never be taken away by a couple of bad cons. And I know I say this all the time, but be loud about the discrimination and inequity that you see. There is always, always, always room for growth and room for second chances. Now, I cannot wait to go on another adventure, which, speaking of, you are not going to want to miss, so be sure to drop a subscribe, like the video, and comment down below about your experiences with conventions. And before you go, I want to say thank you all so freaking much for 4K at the time of writing this. I cannot work a typical job because of my disability, so getting to do this thing that I love so much is magical. And if you want to support me so that I can do this full time, be sure to check out my Patreon for monthly exclusive content and updates. But even if you're just watching, liking, commenting, following, subscribing, or even hitting that little notification bell right next to the subscribe button, I know you haven't done it, I know you need to do it. You're doing more than you could ever know. And with that, I will see you in the next one. Bye for now. This video took me so long to finish. So freaking long to finish. And I think it's because for a while, I could not get myself to start the script. Even though I've had this idea for like over a year at this point. I don't know. I hope y'all liked it. Bye.